Johnny Hammer, or you can say it and it translates pretty easily in a lot of languages. Anyway, I'm a TBB North student, and I'm going to be exploring 2 essential questions and 1 essential idea that I've been thinking about a lot on this gap year. The first question that I really started confronting at the very beginning of the trip is, what do I believe in? Then that led me to realizing my own privileges. Race, my gender, my nationality, my socioeconomic status, my education, etc. And I realized that my privilege holds a lot of power. So my next question is, what do I do with my power? I first began talking about the concept of privilege in high school. I had teachers encourage me and my classmates to begin talking about dynamics within our own culture, dynamics of race, dynamics of nationality, dynamics of socioeconomic status. And I was beginning to have a cognitive understanding of what privilege was, but it never really hit me emotionally. And that was because I was still talking about privilege with a very privileged group of people. And also, I was surrounded in a privileged culture. I had no idea what it felt like to be a minority. But there was one particular instant in high school when I did feel privilege emotionally. And that was when I was talking with one of my teachers about my religion, which is Christianity. And my teacher was expressing to me how she felt women were oppressed in the Bible. First time I had ever really considered oppression within my religion. I was born and raised in a Christian family, attended a Christian elementary school, had a really strong Christian community. And that moment really catalyzed me to begin questioning a lot of the concepts that I'd come to accept as fact. So before TBB, my mission was to try to step away from my culture in order to understand it better and also see how other people view it. I now see that my privilege is a result of my culture. And so by trying to step away from my culture, I was also trying to step away unconsciously from my privilege. So, like I said, one of the first questions I asked myself when I was beginning this trip is, what do I believe in? And I was finding answers to privilege from the cognitive sense to the emotional sense and my moments of discomfort. And one of these moments came right at the beginning of the trip. Like I said, I was born and raised in a Christian family. And where I grew up, that was the majority of people. But going into TBB, I was the only self-identifying Christian, and then one of the only people of a Christian background. So all of a sudden, I was a minority, and I was like, whoa, people don't know like the common basics of Christianity that I thought everybody knew. We had this one exercise in a seminar, and it was to write about stereotypes that you associate with certain things. And on the board of Christianity, I saw words like judgmental, oppressive, always converting, etc. And that hit me really deeply. It felt like a personal attack on me. And up until that point in the trip, I had felt misunderstood within that identity that I hold. But what I later came to realize is that this wasn't a personal attack on my religion, on what I believed, but this was rather judgments on the institution, which holds a lot of privilege. In the United States, Christianity is the predominant religion, and where we were at the time in Ghana, that is well the predominant religion. And it was really difficult for a lot of my friends who weren't Christian to have conversations about religion with locals in Ghana. So I realized a couple things in this experience. First of all, that my religion gives me a very unique lens into how I see the world. But then also, my religion is a privilege because I'm not constantly questioned about what I believe in, where I was at. I continue to confront privilege all throughout this trip, but I'm going to jump forward to the end when we were in Ecuador. And at the time in Ecuador, we were shadowing English teachers. And I was in a farming town. I was at a public junior high and high school. And the majority of people in this town were from a mestizo background, which is a mixture between indigenous and European descent. And the western coast of Ecuador had suffered from a pretty massive earthquake in April of 2016. So the school was largely destroyed. And because this was already an impoverished area, the students had very little resources to work with. There were many moments I confronted so many privileges in myself in this experience. But the first one was realizing how special my education has been. Thank you. And how where I am today is a result of the wonderful teachers that I've had in my life. Also, I never realized the power that I had to be able to stand in front of a classroom and try to teach Spanish speakers English. But then talking with my peers about that, especially the women in my group, they told me about their frustrations of going to the front of the classroom and constantly being catcalled or sexualized by students. And that was when I realized that I do have privilege within my own gender, to be able to stand up and not be looked at in a sexual way or a dominating sexual way. Additionally, talking with the students and how much they wanted to go to the United States and experience my culture, I realized how lucky I am as an American to be able to go to their country and also to be able to afford to go to their country and see how they live. But currently, can't afford to come to the United States in the first place, but then also because of our politics, it's much more difficult for them as Latinos to come to the United States. So what I realized in my experience in Shawnee was that my privilege extends beyond my own culture, and also that my privilege is a way that people define me. Often when I'm confronting privilege, I begin to feel feelings of guilt. And I wonder how certain privileges that favor me so much became to exist on a global scale. And I quickly linked that to colonization during our time in Ghana. We were staying in a town called Cape Coast. And to give you some background, where the country of Ghana currently is today in West Africa, that was the hub of the transatlantic slave trade in between Africa and the Americas. And there are about 35 existing slave forts in Ghana today. And Cape Coast is the major one. But there was this moment where I was standing outside of the slave fort on the rocks by the ocean, and I was looking at it. And up on top was this architecturally beautiful white building, which was the administrator's bedroom. And I had the opportunity to go in there and look out at the sea and feel the breeze coming in. And it was this very peaceful feeling. But then literally directly below him, and where I was also standing from the rocks, were the slave dungeons, where thousands of people were kept in horrible conditions with hardly any food, hardly any water, living in their feces. And I couldn't help but feeling my own guilt for having so many privileges of my own that are in relation to the colonizers, but then also the power dynamics that still exist within our society today, that there are people on top and there are people below. And even within Cape Coast, we clearly saw that. As Westerners coming into this town, we were treated like royalty while the local population slept on the streets some nights. And what this experience made me realize, and it's been difficult to confront, but it's that I can't take away my privilege, and also I can't reverse history. So now that I do believe privilege exists and I understand it in an emotional sense, my question is, what do I do with my power, since my privilege does give me power? And one takeaway that I said from earlier of what do I believe in is that my privilege gives me a very unique lens of how I see the world. And when I was in Ghana, because I related to the people through Christianity, I was able to talk with them and really learn about their lives. And as I was learning about their lives, I began to see how they viewed the world differently than I did. They had different identities that caused them to see the world differently. And as I learned about how they saw the world, I began to question my own judgment, my morals, my values, and seeing that possibly how I see the world is not the way that everyone should see it. There is no one right way to see the world. Additionally, I told you when I was in Ecuador, I realized that my privilege extends beyond my own culture and is also a way that people define me. When I was in Ghana, we were studying public health, and I was shadowing nurses at a healthcare clinic and this little tiny community. And the healthcare nurses frequently go to the junior high and talk with the students about healthcare related stuff. And I was currently doing a project on garbage management in Ghana. And they were like, hey, why don't you talk to the students about garbage? And I was like, I was thrilled. I was like, I'm gonna be able to test the waters of my project and maybe like help this community out a little bit. And that was where I realized I went wrong. On the day that I was supposed to give the presentation, I had this realization that thing about how this community actually manages their own garbage. So who am I as a foreigner to go into their community and tell these young, vulnerable students how they should be like managing their garbage system? And that's the problem that a lot of privileged people face, is that we have this confidence that we're just told in our culture that we should have. But that is also filled with ignorance and arrogance, and it can cause a lot of problems for people unintentionally. So, like I said, my essential question is, what do I do with my power if I can't take away my privilege? And I hope this is a question that I continue to ask for my entire life. But right now, my answer to it is that I need to continue to understand my own privilege, understand myself, and then also understand others. Because only by understanding can I use my power to empower others. And that's how I think I can be an agent of change. Thank you. Any questions? Yeah.
What a great presentation. That was just, I learned a lot from you and really relate to a lot of the things that you were saying. Can you tell us how the garbage thing turned out?
Yeah. So garbage management is the problem that exists in many developing countries. And are you talking about the specific moment with the students?
Or like how you realized, oh my God, I'm coming in here to tell them how to deal with their garbage.
Right.
And how did you deal with that? What did you do and what came out of that?
Right. That was it was difficult to address because I literally realized it right when I got to the and the nurses were like, why do you want to give this presentation? I was like, because this is an extreme power dynamic. And they didn't understand what I was talking about. They're like, oh, you can help these students. But I just I had to lay down the line that I'm not going to speak at this, and if you force me to, I'm going to have to leave. But we ended up going to the school and just observing the classroom environment. One thing that we talked a lot about in the education unit at TVB is how education can be liberating, but it can also be oppressive. And what I saw from the education system there was that the way that students were learning was listening to anything that adult has to say and accepting it as true. It's a big issue, I think, and especially as being a white American, going into a country and if you don't know many white people, it's you want to hear what they have to say. And if you don't know any context of their culture. Does that make sense?
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah.
So you've got your power issue. So for your short term, how are you going to use your power next year when you go to college?
Yeah.
And what is sort of your midterm, long-term vision of yourself using your power?
Yeah. I definitely hope to bring the things that I've learned into my college experience next year at Oxy.
Yeah.
But one thing that I'm a little nervous for is coming across as arrogant. Even though I do have these new perspectives, it's how can I talk about these things and help people without coming across just this wealthy white kid? In the long term, I've gotten from this experience a lot more interested in education. And I think I'd like to work at a summer camp this summer. Yeah. But I see education as a tool to empower others and help people understand. So I think that's what I'd like to do possibly. But I'm open to ideas. So it's fun. Yeah.
So it sounds like you're pretty like Christian still. Did you ever find yourself like questioning your religion? And if not, like how do you plan, and I'm a former gap year student, so you don't need to have this all laid out. Like how do you plan to confront like stuff in the church as far as like not defining this as like mission work?
Of TBB as mission work?
Yeah, because I know like in my church context, they were always like, oh, like you're going to do like volunteer mission stuff.
Right.
Like, so like how do you kind of deal with that in that context?
Right. So there's a couple things. I think that my views of religion have changed a lot, just from like it started in high school, but then this trip definitely helped that process. And I would say that today I'm really wanting to explore many different faiths because I think there's a lot to learn. However, I do still identify as culturally Christian, and depending on the group of people that I'm with, I'll call myself a Christian because I think that gives power. But if I'm with a group of Christians, I might not call myself Christian. I want to show how I want to hear about other ideas. And your second part was, oh yeah, okay. I think that's a problem with our culture, is that our culture thinks that we have this responsibility to go and help others. That's just like a very common American thing, like, oh, you're going abroad, oh, you're going to Mexico, you're gonna go work in a community.
Yeah.
So I know that Georg had that problem when he was in Ecuador. We were talking with some other gap year students, and they're like, you're not helping anything in the community, like you're just here to learn. So I guess just explaining that context that like, yeah, there's actually if you go into community and try to help in the name of your goodwill.
Hand out copies of To Hell with Good Intentions.
Right. Yeah.
Talking about privilege, I'm not sure if you defined it precisely, but how would you say, what would you say?
Yeah. I would say privilege is giving certain advantages to people who have certain qualities. And I think that privilege is also relative, depending on the culture. But as a whole, I would say that white privilege definitely exists, and that is a result of Western dominance in the world.
You mentioned that starting the trip, you felt most people didn't identify themselves as far as the religion and stuff like that. So how did that affect communication, and maybe how may communication may have improved over the trip as far as that?
Yeah. So yeah, I was the only like self-identifying Christian in my group, and I quickly realized that like a lot of the things that I came to accept as just fact within religion, like if you live in the United States or Europe, you probably know these things about Christianity. And what I realized is that I had a lot to learn about how other people view Christianity rather than just like the positive side of it, but then also that my friends had a lot to learn about Christianity other than the negative side of it. So it was kind of a shared experience. And I think it became something that we could talk to you about and like something that people also came to respect. Yeah.
Are there ways in which your experience deepened your faith?
There were a couple moments on this trip where I like broke down in tears. And that was because I didn't feel that really important aspect of my life had been addressed enough. I would say that I do think that there's a lot of important teachings from Jesus, and I do want to learn more about those, especially love and respect for people. So I think when I go back home, I want to continue deepening my faith, but not necessarily in like a boxed form. Yeah. Yeah.
Is your notion of privilege that it is always unearned, or do you make a distinction between earned privilege and unearned privilege?
I think there's a distinction. between earned privilege and unearned privilege. I think that a lot of people are uncomfortable talking about this concept of privilege because it takes away, because they feel like it's saying that like, I didn't work for what I have today. And it's not that you didn't work hard. Like I've had to work hard to be here, but it's also just the opportunities that I had were the result of things that were in my life that were available to me when I was born. So I think that people can earn their privilege, but there's also just like you're born with privilege too. That is, yeah? Okay.
And you could squander your privilege.
Yeah.
Have you found that there's like any topics that you've gotten more passionate about since like starting to really see privilege, like the garbage example? You're like, oh no, you know, like, and when you were saying like when the female friends in your group were like, oh yeah, we get like catcalled in school. Like, did you start to see more of it, and like, how did that affect you once you could like acknowledge it?
Yeah. I think it affected me in a lot of ways. I would say that like I'm a fairly confident person, but I realize that my confidence that I have in myself is probably the result of the like comfortable life that I've had to live. So it's about humbling myself, and humbling is by learning about other people's experiences. I'm not sure if you're asking for like a specific area that I'm really interested in, like women's rights or like white privilege. Is that what you're asking
Well,
for?
it's kind of like, have you found anything you're much more passionate about now that you can like walk in the Women's March and like all that stuff?
I would do that for sure, yeah. Education is one thing that I'm a lot more interested in. I just see education as a really valuable tool to help people understand the world. I don't know. I don't like have a specific one really, so I can't exactly answer your question, but I hope that I can continue talking about privilege with people, especially with people who don't, like who only understand it cognitively rather than emotionally.
Did you ever have the feeling during your trip to get free from your privileges by working with people?
Did I ever try to become free from my privilege? Is that what you're saying? Did I become free?
Yeah.
Huh. I don't know. I don't know if I ever became free completely, because the whole fact was that I was on this trip as a result of my privilege. But I think that being in these countries made them a lot more, like, it made me see them a lot more. So in a sense, I didn't step away from them. I like actually dove into them even more. And I think it's the only times you can really step away from your privileges and like not realize it is when you're in a place where you're only surrounded by privileged people. Yeah. Yeah.
Regarding that topic, what would you say to the leaders of our country right now?
Yeah. I think, I don't know, that's a lot of pressure on me now. I guess you got a lot to learn. Yeah. There's one thing that really made me upset on this trip was that the things that Americans vote for today affect people all around the world. And I don't think a lot of Americans know that. So I think I would say that like when you make a decision in the government, you're not just thinking about American citizens. It's not America first. Yeah.
Hey.
Yeah, hi.
I'm a Gap Year alum, and I think it's Paulo Freire who discusses the concept of a social debt. Did you discuss that?
Is that from Pedagogy of the Oppressed?
Yes, where you like abandon all your, this is as 5 years ago, so like, you abandon all of your cultural notions, and like you're not a leader, but you're more of a follower of a movement that exists like more originally or grassroots. Like, do you think it's possible to ever like fully abandon privilege, commit yourself to a social debt? Sorry. I'm like, you're well versed in this area, so I'm just curious.
Well, I'm glad you think so. I think I'm still learning a lot.
Yeah, I mean, I don't know.
Since we seek to have a question to every question, not an answer to every question, whatever the TBV phrase is, I think the answer is like, I'm still wondering the question, is it ever possible to step away fully from privilege? And I don't know if that's possible. So I don't know. I don't know if you can fully step away from privilege. Yeah.
No one knows.
Hammer, with your interest in education, I think you've done a great job getting us all involved and interested in this topic of privilege right now. One takeaway you wish that we would all take from this?
One takeaway. I guess that the world is a lot bigger than the United States. And even though we do live a certain way in the United States, people live differently. But the fact is that, like, as an American, you have a lot of privileges that are like you don't know if you don't step outside this world. So if you have the opportunity to travel, for sure, go do it. Make you realize a lot. And don't just stay at the hotel. Go and like live at the hostel and go walk around the town. Yeah.
Is it kind of piggybacking on her question a little bit? Like how you can step away and maybe that's the way to get rid of your privilege? But do you think you can lead in a way that you'll be comfortable with? So like be a leader of education or just kind of be at the forefront of some change, but not, I don't know, be uncomfortable with your privilege at the same time. It's a big,
Yeah, can you try to say that one more time so I can understand?
yeah, just like, not, like you didn't feel comfortable speaking in front of that class, right? Do you think you'll ever, I don't know, like feel comfortable to get up in front of the class and be like, I'm aware that these are my ideas and it came from my past, but I'm gonna stand up here and just say with confidence what I've learned and
Right.
or something like that.
I think it just really depends on the context. Maybe there's something in the world where even if I learn a ton about it, like I'll never be the person to go and do that just because I am not born and bred of that culture. But I think in the United States for sure.
So when you're in your own culture, that's
Right. But even when I'm in my own culture, there's certain situations where I don't know if I would because I wasn't born and bred. Like there's still subcultures within US. But I do think that if you learn enough, you can do that.
Thank you, Aaron.
Thank you.